The morning sun was blazing down on the city streets, creating long, sharp shadows against the brick buildings. It was the kind of bright, clear day that usually makes people feel happy and energetic. But for the man standing in the alleyway, the light felt exposing. He stood in front of a cracked mirror propped against a dumpster, carefully adjusting the wig on his head. The hair was coarse and tangled, a dull gray color that looked like it hadn't been washed in weeks. He rubbed some theatrical dirt onto his cheeks, smearing it carefully so it looked like grime that had built up over time, not just makeup. Keanu Reeves took a deep breath and looked at his reflection. The face staring back was not the famous actor everyone knew. The eyes were the same, soft and brown, but they were hidden behind the brim of a tattered baseball cap and shadowed by the wig. He wore an oversized, heavy coat that was much too warm for the weather, and a pair of pants that were frayed at the hems. He smelled like a mixture of old sweat and dust, a scent the makeup artist had applied with a spray bottle. He wasn't filming a movie today. There were no cameras rolling, no director yelling "cut," and no stunt doubles to take the fall. He was doing this for himself. He wanted to feel what it was like to be invisible. He had so much in his life, but he knew that for so many people outside his bubble, the world was a cold and indifferent place. He wanted to understand that feeling in his gut, not just imagine it. So he stepped out of the alley and onto the busy sidewalk. The change was instant. On normal days, walking down this street, heads would turn. People would whisper, pull out their phones, or shyly ask for a selfie. But today, as he shuffled his feet and looked down at the cracked pavement, he became a ghost. The crowd rushed past him like a river flowing around a stone. A businessman in a sharp suit brushed by him, knocking into his shoulder without even muttering an apology. A young couple laughed as they walked arm in arm, their eyes fixed on each other, completely unaware of the man trudging along just a few feet away. Keanu felt a strange tightness in his chest. It was a mix of relief and sadness. It was peaceful not to be chased, but it was lonely to be unseen. He pulled the coat tighter around himself, despite the heat, and kept walking. His goal was a small diner a few blocks away. He had passed it many times in his car, always noticing the bright neon sign and the people sitting in the window, enjoying their meals. Today, he would try to walk through that front door as someone else. As he walked, he noticed the little things he usually ignored in his chauffeured car. He felt the uneven pavement under his worn-out boots, which were slightly too small and pinched his toes. He saw the trash stuck in the grates of the storm drains, and the gum blackened on the concrete. He heard the harsh sounds of traffic, the honking horns, the roaring engines, and the overlapping chatter of 100 different conversations. It was overwhelming. He realized how exhausting it must be to live like this every single day, with your senses constantly under attack and no quiet, safe place to retreat to. Finally, the diner came into view. It was a cozy place with large glass windows that let the sunlight pour in. Through the glass, he could see people eating pancakes, drinking coffee from white mugs, and reading newspapers. It looked warm and inviting, but as he got closer, his steps slowed down. A wave of nervousness hit him. This was the real test. Would they let him in? Would they look at him with disgust? He reached the entrance. It wasn't a grand door, just a simple glass pane with a metal handle. He paused for a moment, watching a woman in a gym outfit exit holding a smoothie. She held the door open for him as she left, but she didn't look him in the eye. She just glanced at his dirty clothes and quickly looked away, slipping past him to get to the fresh air. Keanu nodded a silent thank you to her retreating back, but she didn't see it. He reached out and wrapped his fingers around the cool metal handle. He hesitated. In his real life, he could go anywhere he wanted. He could buy the entire restaurant if he felt like it. But in this disguise, he had no power. He was at the mercy of strangers. He took another deep breath, bracing himself for the cold shoulder, and pulled the door open. A small bell above the door chimed, a cheerful sound that seemed out of place in his current mood. He stepped inside, and the atmosphere hit him instantly. The air was thick with the smell of bacon, eggs, and strong coffee. It was a delicious, comforting smell that made his stomach rumble, reminding him that he hadn't eaten since the night before. The noise level was high, the clatter of silverware against plates, the hissing of the grill from the open kitchen, and the loud hum of conversation. He walked slowly, feeling the eyes of the room shift toward him. For a second, the chatter seemed to dip in volume. It was a subtle reaction, the kind that happens when something unexpected enters a comfortable space. He saw a man near the counter stiffen slightly and pull his jacket in, as if protecting his belongings. A mother in a booth leaned over and whispered something to her son, pulling the boy closer to her side. Keanu kept his head down, staring at a scuff mark on the linoleum floor. He made his way toward the back, trying to take up as little space as possible. He found a small booth in the corner, tucked away behind a large potted plastic plant. It was dimmer there, a bit more hidden. He slid into the seat, the vinyl squeaking under his weight. The table was sticky, wiped down with a rag that hadn't been changed recently, but he didn't mind. He was just grateful to be off his feet. He sat there for a moment, hunched over, his hands resting on the table in dirty gloves with the fingertips cut off. He watched the room through the gaps in the leaves of the plastic plant. He saw the waitresses rushing back and forth, balancing heavy trays. He saw the customers laughing and eating, living their lives in a bubble of comfort that seemed miles away from where he was sitting. Minutes passed, and nobody came to his table. The busyness of the lunch rush swirled around him, but the corner booth was like an island. A young man with a notepad walked past him 3 times, his eyes skimming over Keanu without really seeing him. It was as if Keanu had become part of the furniture, just another background detail in the busy scene. He felt that familiar ache of loneliness again, sharper this time. He realized that being ignored wasn't just about people being rude. It was about feeling like you didn't exist, like you didn't matter enough for someone to spare 10 seconds of their time. He wondered if he should just leave. Maybe this was a bad idea. He shifted in his seat, preparing to stand up and walk back out into the bright sun, back to the safety of his real life. But then he saw movement out of the corner of his eye. A woman with a dark ponytail and a tired but kind face was wiping down a table nearby. She looked like she had been running around all day. She paused, stretched her back, and then her eyes landed on him. She didn't look away. She didn't wrinkle her nose. She just looked at him, really saw him, and then she walked over. The woman walked over to the corner booth, moving with a steady rhythm despite the chaos of the lunch rush. She didn't have a notepad in her hand, just a damp cloth that she was using to wipe down tables as she went. When she reached his booth, she didn't stand too far away, nor did she stand too close. She found a respectful distance, a space that didn't make him feel cornered or threatened. She looked tired, there were dark circles under her eyes, but when she looked at him, her gaze was open and steady. "Hi there," she said softly. "Sorry for the wait. It's a little crazy in here today." Keanu kept his head tilted slightly down, looking up at her through the fake, tangled hair that fell over his forehead. He mumbled a quiet, "It's okay. Can I get you started with something to drink, coffee, water?" she asked. Her voice wasn't rushed. She wasn't tapping her foot or looking over her shoulder at the other tables. For that moment, she was just there with him. "Just coffee, please," Keanu said, keeping his voice rough and low. Black, she nodded and gave him a small, genuine smile. "Coming right up." As she turned to walk away, Keanu felt a knot loosen in his chest. She hadn't recoiled. She hadn't treated him like he was invisible or like he was a problem that needed to be solved. She had treated him like a customer. He watched her move behind the counter, efficiently pouring a cup of black coffee into a thick white mug. She grabbed a small pitcher of cream and a few packets of sugar, even though he hadn't asked for them, and placed them on a small tray. She was back in less than 2 minutes. She set the mug down gently, careful not to spill a drop, and placed the cream and sugar beside it. "Here you go," she said. "The food is really good today if you're hungry." The cook made a big batch of scrambled eggs and bacon earlier, and it's still fresh. Keanu's stomach gave a loud, embarrassing growl that he couldn't suppress. He felt his face heat up under the dirt and makeup. He instinctively reached into his pocket, his fingers brushing against the few coins and crumpled dollar bills he had placed there for the act. He knew he didn't have enough for a full meal, at least not enough to leave a tip, which made him feel even worse. I don't think I have enough for food," he muttered, looking down at his hands. "Just the coffee is fine, thank you." The waitress didn't miss a beat. She didn't look at him with pity, which he hated, or with impatience, which he feared. Instead, she leaned in a little closer like she was sharing a secret. "You know what?" she whispered, glancing toward the kitchen window. "I think the cook actually made too much eggs this morning." We're going to end up throwing them out if someone doesn't eat them. It would really help me out if you could take a plate off my hands. I hate seeing good food go in the trash. Keanu looked up, searching her face. He knew it was a kind lie. He had worked in enough restaurants to know that food costs money and nothing is free. She was covering for him. She was protecting his dignity by making it sound like he was doing her a favor. He was so touched by the gesture that he felt a lump form in his throat, making it hard to speak. He nodded slowly. "Okay," he managed to say, "that would be good." "Thank you, no problem at all," she said, her bright eyes crinkling at the corners. "I'll be right back." While she went to get the food, Keanu wrapped both hands around the warm coffee mug. The heat seeped into his cold fingers, grounding him. He took a sip. It was strong and bitter, exactly what he needed. As he sat there, sipping the hot liquid, he watched her work. She was incredible. He saw her handle a table of loud businessmen who were demanding and rude. One of them snapped his fingers at her, treating her like she was beneath him. She didn't get angry. She didn't snap back. She just listened to their complaints, apologized with professional grace, and fixed the order with a tired smile on her face. Then he saw her stop by an elderly couple sitting near the window. She wasn't just taking their order, she was asking them about their day. She laughed at something the old man said and gently patted the woman on the shoulder. It was clear that she knew them, that they were regulars who relied on her not just for food, but for a moment of connection. She returned to his booth with a plate that was piled high. There were fluffy scrambled eggs, several strips of crispy bacon, and 2 thick pieces of toast. It was way more than just extra food. It was a hearty, full meal. "Here we are," she said cheerfully, setting the plate down. "Enjoy." Keanu looked at the food, then up at her. This is really a lot," he said quietly. "You sure? Positive?" she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "Eat up. You look like you could use it." She walked away to check on another table, leaving him alone with the feast. He picked up a fork, his hand shaking slightly. He took a bite of the eggs. They were perfectly seasoned, hot, and comforting. It tasted better than any meal he had eaten in a long time, maybe because it wasn't just food. It was an act of kindness. As he ate, he felt the stress of the morning, the anxiety of the disguise, and the weight of the city slowly fading away. He watched her as he ate. He noticed that her uniform was clean, but a little faded at the seams. He noticed that when she thought no one was looking, she would roll her neck to the side, wincing in pain, or press her hand to her lower back. She was exhausted. She had been on her feet for hours, dealing with difficult people, running back and forth, yet she had taken the time to make sure he was fed. He glanced down at the small table where she had left her order pad. There was a photograph tucked into the plastic sleeve of the folder. It was a picture of her standing next to an older woman in a hospital bed. The older woman looked frail, her skin thin and papery, but she was smiling at the camera. The waitress in the photo looked younger, happier, and full of hope. Seeing that photo made Keanu's chest ache. She wasn't just working for herself. She was carrying a heavy load, probably medical bills, or care for her mother. Yet she still had enough compassion in her heart to spare a thought for a stranger in a corner booth. He finished the last bite of toast and wiped his mouth with a paper napkin. He felt full, not just in his stomach, but in his spirit. He sat back against the cracked vinyl of the booth and watched her finish her shift. He saw her counting tips at the counter, looking worried as she did the math in her head. She slipped a few dollars into her pocket and kept the rest in a jar near the register, probably for the bills. Keanu knew he couldn't leave without letting her know how much this meant. He couldn't just walk out and go back to his real life without doing something. The disguise was meant to help him understand the world, but this woman had shown him something unexpected. She had shown him that goodness exists in the hardest places. He reached into his pocket again, feeling the thick stack of bills he had hidden deep inside the lining of his dirty coat, ready for this exact moment. He waited for her to look his way, preparing himself to change the dynamic of their interaction forever. He wasn't just a homeless man anymore, and she wasn't just a waitress. They were two human beings who had shared a moment of grace in a busy, uncaring world. The afternoon sun had shifted angles, casting long, golden beams across the diner floor. The lunch rush was finally starting to thin out, but the energy in the room remained frantic. The waitress was moving just as fast as before, weaving between tables with a pot of coffee in one hand and a stack of plates in the other. Keanu stayed in his corner watching her. He had finished every bite of the food she brought him, and now he was just lingering, sipping the last dregs of his coffee and preparing himself for what he needed to do next. He watched as she stopped at a table near the center of the room. A younger man in an expensive suit was sitting there, looking annoyed. He was waving his hand in the air, trying to get her attention. When she arrived, he didn't greet her. He immediately started complaining about the temperature of his soup. He spoke loudly, enough that people at nearby tables turned their heads to look. Keanu felt a flash of anger in his chest. He wanted to stand up and tell the man to stop being so rude, that the waitress was doing her best, and that she was a human being, not a servant. But he stayed put. He was just a homeless man in this scenario. If he spoke up, security would be called, or worse, he would make a scene that would only make her job harder. So he watched her reaction instead. She didn't argue. She didn't roll her eyes. She simply nodded, apologized sincerely, and offered to take it back to the kitchen to heat it up. She treated him with patience that Keanu knew he probably didn't deserve. It was a level of professionalism that went beyond just doing a job. It was a quiet strength. As she walked away from the rude table, Keanu saw her pause for a split second by the service station. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes for just a moment, and straightened her back. It was a tiny reset button, a way for her to clear the negativity and keep going. When she opened her eyes again, the mask of polite service was back in place. Keanu admired her resilience. He knew that the world could be a hard place, especially for people who were just trying to survive. But seeing her handle that difficult customer with such grace made him respect her immensely. He thought again about the photograph he had seen tucked into her order pad. The image of the older woman in the hospital bed stayed in his mind. He knew how expensive medical care could be. He knew the stress of watching someone you love fade away, the feeling of helplessness that comes with illness. He had lived through his own tragedies, and he knew that money couldn't fix everything, but it could certainly remove a mountain of stress. It could buy time. It could buy comfort. It could allow a daughter to sit by her mother's bedside without worrying about how she was going to pay the rent at the end of the month. Keanu reached into the deep inner pocket of his tattered coat. His fingers brushed against the thick stack of bills he had stuffed in there before leaving his home that morning. It was a significant amount of cash, more than most people carried in their wallets. He had brought it intending to give it away if he found someone who truly needed it, someone who touched his heart. He pulled the stack out, keeping it low and hidden beneath the edge of the table. He didn't count it, but he knew it was enough to make a real difference. It wasn't just a tip, it was a lifeline. He looked around the diner to make sure no one was watching him. The few remaining customers were absorbed in their phones or their conversations. The staff was busy in the kitchen. The coast was clear. He took the paper placemat from under his coffee cup and folded the money inside it. He hesitated for a moment. Was this too strange? Would she be suspicious? He decided to add a note. He grabbed a pen from the holder on the table. He thought about what to write. He could write something like "Thank you for the food" or "God bless," but those felt too generic. He wanted to acknowledge what she had actually done. She had seen him when no one else had. She had treated him with dignity, so he wrote simply, "Thank you for seeing me. Keep being you." He folded the paper over the money one more time, making a neat square packet. He placed it right on the table, directly over the spot where his plate had been. Then he took the empty coffee cup and turned it upside down, placing it on top of the paper to weigh it down and hide the cash from prying eyes until she was the one to pick it up. Just as he set the cup down, he saw her walking toward him. She had a pot of fresh coffee in her hand and a sympathetic look on her face. She thought he was lingering because he had nowhere else to go, and she was coming to check on him. Perhaps to offer a refill, or just a kind word before she had to kick him out to make room for paying customers. Her empathy was unending. She stopped at the edge of the booth and looked down at his empty plate. "Looks like you found some room for that toast after all," she said, her voice gentle. Keanu nodded, looking up at her from beneath the brim of his cap. "It was the best meal I've had in a long time," he said truthfully. "You were right. The cook is a magician." She smiled, and this time the smile reached all the way to her eyes. It was a tired smile, but a beautiful one. "I'll tell him you said so." "He likes hearing that." She started to reach for the plate, but Keanu put his hand on the table to stop her for a moment. He needed to say something. He couldn't just leave the money and disappear without speaking to her one last time, face to face, as the man she thought he was. "You work really hard," he said softly. "I watch people. I see a lot of things. You make this place better, you make people feel better." The waitress stopped moving. She looked at him, slightly surprised by the depth of his words. People rarely took the time to notice the effort she put in, let alone compliment her on it. She blinked a few times, clearly touched. "Thank you," she whispered. That really means a lot to hear. Some days are harder than others, you know." "I know," Keanu said. "I know." He could see the weariness in her shoulders, the heavy burden she was carrying. He wanted to tell her it was going to be okay. He wanted to tell her that her mother was going to be all right, or that she was going to make it through this tough patch. But he couldn't make promises like that. Life didn't work that way. All he could do was leave her with the resources to fight her own battles. He slowly pulled his hand back from the table. "I have to get going," he said. "Thank you for the kindness." "You take care of yourself out there," she said, her voice full of genuine concern. "It's supposed to get chilly tonight. Try to find a warm spot." "I will," he promised. She reached down to pick up the plate. Her hand was inches away from the overturned coffee cup. Keanu felt his heart rate pick up. This was it. The moment was about to change. He stood up slowly, his joints stiff from sitting in the hard booth for so long. He pulled his coat around him, getting ready to assume the role of the grateful homeless man leaving the restaurant. But he knew that in a few seconds, the role would end. He looked at her one last time, really looking at her face, trying to memorize the kindness in her eyes. He wanted to remember this moment. He wanted to remember that even in a world that often felt cold and indifferent, there were still people like her who would give a stranger a hot meal and a warm smile without expecting anything in return. She was the hero of this story, not him. He was just the observer, the lucky person who got to witness her goodness up close. "Goodbye," he said softly. "Have a good day," she replied, stacking his plate on top of the dirty dishes in her hand. She turned to walk toward the kitchen, the plate rattling slightly against the others. She hadn't noticed the weight under the cup yet. She would only see it when she went to scrape the food off or wipe down the table. Keanu took a deep breath. It was time. He reached up and placed his fingers on the edge of his wig, preparing to reveal the truth. He didn't want the money to be a mystery. He wanted her to know where it came from, and he wanted her to know that her kindness had been recognized by someone who understood the value of it. He took a step away from the booth, drawing attention to himself. The restaurant was quieter now, and his movement caught the eye of a few people. He waited until she turned back around, perhaps to grab a napkin she had dropped. He needed her eyes on him. He needed the connection to be complete before the transformation happened. This was the bridge between his hidden life and his public life. A moment where two worlds were about to collide in a way that neither of them would ever forget. The air in the diner seemed to stand still as Keanu stood by the booth. His hand moved slowly to the edge of the wig. He could feel the sweat on his forehead beneath the scratchy synthetic hair. He looked at the waitress, who had just turned back around to grab a napkin she had dropped. For a second, time felt suspended. The noise of the kitchen, the clinking of silverware, and the hum of the refrigerator all faded into the background. The only thing that mattered was the connection between the two of them. He hooked his fingers under the hairline of the wig and pulled. It came away with a slight tearing sound, the adhesive letting go of his skin. He shook his head once, letting his real hair settle into place. Then he reached up and peeled away the fake beard that had hidden his jawline, dropping it onto the dirty plate. Finally, he took off the tattered baseball cap and held it in his hands. The transformation was instant and jarring. The man who had been hunched over, invisible and ignored, suddenly stood tall. The weary look on his face shifted into something familiar. The sharp nose, the gentle eyes, the sad yet hopeful expression that millions of people recognized from movie screens around the world. He was suddenly himself again. The waitress froze. She was holding a small stack of napkins, her hand halfway to the table. Her eyes went wide, darting from his face to the wig on the plate and back again. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. It was as if her brain was refusing to accept what her eyes were seeing. The dirty, homeless man she had just served a hot meal to was not who she thought he was. Keanu didn't say anything immediately. He just stood there looking at her with a softness that made her heart skip a beat. He didn't pose. He didn't look around to see if anyone else was watching. He just held her gaze, wanting her to understand that he was the same person she had been kind to just moments ago. Around them, the reaction began to ripple outward. A man in a nearby booth stopped chewing his sandwich, staring with his fork in midair. A couple by the window whispered urgently to each other, pointing at the corner. The busboy dropped a metal tray with a loud clang, but he didn't even bend to pick it up. The realization was sweeping through the room like a wave. Keanu Reeves was standing in their local diner, looking rugged and unshaven but unmistakably real. The waitress finally found her voice, though it was barely a whisper. "You." Keanu nodded gently. He raised a hand slightly to stop her from saying his name, as if keeping it quiet would protect the moment from shattering. He didn't want a scene. He didn't want people rushing over with phones. He wanted this to be just between them. "I wanted to thank you," he said, his voice losing the rough, gravelly tone he had been using and returning to its natural, deep cadence. "For the coffee, and for the eggs. They were perfect." The waitress blinked rapidly, trying to process the situation. She looked down at the empty plate, then back at his face. She had treated this man with kindness when she thought he had nothing. She had given him food because she thought he was hungry, not because she thought he was a celebrity. The realization that her kindness had been genuine and not influenced by his status made her knees feel weak. I didn't know," she stammered, her face flushing red. You looked like you needed a meal." "I did," Keanu said simply, "but more than that, I needed someone to see me, and you did. You treated me with respect when no one else even looked my way." He gestured slightly toward the table, specifically toward the white coffee cup that was sitting upside down over the folded placemat. "Please," he said, "take a look at what's under the cup." She looked at the cup, confused. She reached out with a trembling hand and lifted it. Underneath was the thick stack of bills, held together by the paper he had written on. She picked it up, feeling the weight of it. As the paper unfolded, she saw the green edges of the money. Her breath hitched in her throat. It wasn't just a tip. It was a small fortune. She looked at the note he had written. "Thank you for seeing me. Keep being you." Her hands began to shake violently as she looked at the amount, then up at him. Tears pooled in her eyes, spilling over onto her cheeks. She didn't know what to say. It was too much. It was life-changing. This is too much," she choked out, trying to hand it back to him. "I can't take this." "You don't understand. I was just doing my job." Keanu shook his head firmly but gently. He didn't take the money. He took a step closer, invading her personal space just a little, and reached out to gently squeeze her shoulder. His touch was warm and grounding. "It's not just about the job," he said, his voice low and intense. "I saw you with the other customers. I saw how you handled that rude man. I saw the picture in your book. I know you're carrying a heavy load. You're taking care of someone, aren't you?" The waitress nodded, unable to speak, the tears flowing freely now. "You deserve a break," he continued. "You're a good person. The world needs more people like you. Please take it. Use it to take care of your family. Use it to take a day off. Just take it." He looked her deep in the eyes, his expression full of sincerity. There was no arrogance in his gesture, only a profound sense of gratitude and a desire to help. He had come here looking for a reality check, and he had found a beacon of light in this tired, hardworking woman. She had given him a meal, but she had given him something much more valuable, hope in humanity. The diner was completely silent now. Everyone was watching the interaction, mesmerized. It was like a scene from a movie, but the emotions were raw and real. No one was taking a video yet. They were just witnessing a moment of pure, unscripted connection. Keanu squeezed her shoulder one last time and then let go. He stepped back, picking up his tattered cap from the table. He didn't put it back on his head. He held it in his hands, a symbol of the disguise he was leaving behind. "You take care of yourself," he said softly, echoing the words she had said to him earlier. "You too," she whispered, clutching the money to her chest like it was the most precious thing in the world. Keanu turned toward the exit. He didn't walk fast. He didn't run away from the attention. He walked with a calm, steady pace, his back straight. The crowd parted for him, not out of fear this time, but out of respect. He passed the table where the rude businessman had been sitting. The man didn't say a word. He just looked down at his plate, looking small and ashamed. As Keanu reached the glass door, he paused for a fraction of a second. He could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on his back. He could feel the energy of the waitress standing behind him, stunned and overwhelmed. He took a deep breath, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. He had done what he came to do. He had acknowledged kindness in its purest form. He pushed the door open, the bell chiming again, brighter this time, and stepped out into the afternoon sun. The glass door swung shut behind him, separating the quiet, shocked interior of the diner from the busy noise of the street. The encounter was over, but the impact of those few minutes would stay with everyone in that room for a very long time. The waitress was still standing by the booth, tears streaming down her face, holding a stack of cash that would change her life. Realizing that the man she had treated with such ordinary kindness had been extraordinary all along, the silence inside the diner didn't last long after the glass door swung shut. It was as if the air in the room had been sucked out for a moment, but now it rushed back in with a chaotic energy. The waitress stood frozen by the booth, her hands trembling as she clutched the stack of money against her chest. The reality of what just happened was starting to sink in, washing over her like a tidal wave. She looked around the room, her eyes wide and wet with tears, almost as if she was checking to see if she had imagined the whole thing. The other customers slowly began to move again. The quiet murmurs started to build up into a loud buzz of excitement. A young man sitting at a table near the window slowly lowered his phone. He had been recording the interaction, just like many people do when something strange happens, but his hand was shaking slightly. He looked at the screen, then back at the waitress, realizing he had captured something incredibly rare. It wasn't a celebrity scandal or a funny fail video. It was a moment of pure, unscripted humanity. The waitress finally moved. She sank back into the booth opposite where the actor had sat, needing to feel the support of the seat beneath her. She carefully placed the money and the note on the table, smoothing out the paper with a shaking hand. She read the words again, "Thank you for seeing me. Keep being you." It felt surreal. Just 20 minutes ago, she had been worried about rent, hospital bills, and the rude customer at table 4. Now, a weight had been lifted off her shoulders that she had been carrying for years. The manager came out from the kitchen, looking confused by the sudden lack of noise and the strange energy in the room. He walked over to the waitress, asking what was going on. She didn't speak, she just turned the note around for him to read and lifted a corner of the cash stack. The manager's eyes practically popped out of his head. He looked at the door, then back at her, a slow smile spreading across his face. He didn't scold her for stopping work. He didn't ask for a cut. He just patted her on the back and told her to take a 10-minute break to breathe. Outside, the actor didn't jump into a fancy car or speed away. He walked a few blocks, feeling the sun on his face and the breeze on his skin. He took off the heavy, dirty coat and carried it over his arm, feeling lighter. He found a quiet bench in a small park and sat down. He watched the people walking by, students, workers, parents with strollers. He wondered how many of them were struggling, how many of them were carrying invisible burdens, and how many just needed someone to offer them a hot meal and a kind word. Back at the diner, the young man with the phone uploaded his video. He didn't add a flashy caption or dramatic music. He just posted it with a simple title, "Keanu Reeves just made a waitress's year." Within minutes, the notifications started exploding. The internet is often a place of anger and arguments, but every once in a while, it becomes a place of celebration. This was one of those times. The video spread faster than wildfire. People didn't just share it, they felt it. Comments poured in from all over the world. Thousands of people wrote about how they worked in service jobs and how hard it was to be ignored or treated badly. Others shared stories of times they were down on their luck and a stranger helped them. The video wasn't viral because a famous actor did something nice. It was viral because it proved that kindness still exists. It showed that you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, whether that book is a homeless man on the street or a tired waitress in a diner. For the waitress, the days that followed were a blur. The money was more than enough to cover the immediate bills. It meant she could take time off work to be with her mother at the hospital without worrying about losing her job. She could pay for the better treatments the doctors had suggested. She could sleep at night without the crushing weight of financial anxiety keeping her awake. But more than the money, she held onto the feeling of that interaction. She held onto the fact that she had been seen. She kept the note he wrote, laminating it carefully so it wouldn't tear. It wasn't just a souvenir from a celebrity encounter. It was a validation of her character. She had been kind when no one was watching. She had been generous when she had very little to give. And that kindness had circled back to her in the most unexpected way. It taught her that good deeds don't always go unnoticed, even if it feels like they do. The diner itself became a bit of a tourist spot for a while. People came in hoping to sit in the same booth, hoping to meet the waitress who had touched the heart of a movie star. But she didn't let it change her. She still worked hard, still refilled coffee cups with a smile, and still treated every customer with respect. If anything, the experience made her kinder. She knew now that everyone she served was fighting a battle she knew nothing about. As for the actor, he never gave an interview about it. He didn't post about it on his social media. He didn't want credit for doing what he felt was the right thing to do. He went back to his life, making movies and walking his own path. But sometimes, when he walked past a diner or saw someone on the street who looked like they were struggling, he would remember that day. He would remember the smell of bacon and coffee, and the tired, beautiful smile of a woman who offered him dignity when he was disguised as a nobody. The story became a modern fable, a reminder that we are all just walking through life together, passing each other in the light and the shadows. It reminded people that you don't have to be rich or famous to change someone's life. You just have to care. A cup of coffee, a plate of eggs, and a moment of genuine connection can mean more than all the money in the world. The sun eventually set on the city, casting long shadows across the streets. The diner lights flickered on, glowing warmly against the darkening sky. Life moved on, the rush hour traffic flowed, and the world kept spinning. But inside that small diner, and in the hearts of the millions who watched the video online, a little spark of hope remained. It was a quiet understanding that in a world that can sometimes feel cold and harsh, there is still warmth to be found if we are brave enough to look for it and kind enough to share it. And sometimes, just sometimes, the person you least expect is the one who teaches you the most important lesson of all. Simply be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle.